After making 4 games that all followed a very similar formula to each other, Scott Cawthon decided that it was finally time for him to do something a bit different. So, following the release of FNAF 4, not only did he release a book for the franchise titled The Silver Eyes, he published an entirely different type of game for the Five Nights at Freddy's series, FNAF World. And fan reception for this game was pretty rough. So rough, in fact, that Scott literally felt the need to apologize for the state that the game was in, and promised that he would do better by it. And to his credit, he did make some changes to FNAF World to try and improve the game, for whatever that's worth anymore. But today, we're not here to talk about how good or bad the gameplay of FNAF World is 10 years later. We're here to talk about the story, and how it's meant to fit into the overall narrative of the series. This is actually a really hard question to answer because this game does not take itself seriously at any point, which honestly makes it hard for me to take it seriously either. But I've done my research and found a few connections that are very, very interesting. So if you're ready to hear me deep dive into one of FNAF's weirder entries into the series, be sure to like, subscribe, and if you're on mobile, hit the hype button for me a few times. And so, let's begin. Before we even start to research FNAF World properly, we have to answer a pretty big question first and foremost. Is it even canon? You could ask a group of 10 theorists this question, and at least half of them will give completely different answers from each other. Because, well, just look at it. Like I said, this game doesn't even take itself seriously, so are we supposed to take it seriously? I'd love to sit here and say no, that you don't need to take it seriously. But, unfortunately for me, FNAF World is a canon entry into the series. Scott said it himself a few years ago. Listen.
And I had to make something more lighthearted. And in hindsight, what I should have done is, I should have used that for a troll game, or I should have, made something like, Foxy Fighters. I should have just done something that was obviously for fun and not tried to somehow tie it in to a canon game. And that's obvious to me now. But like I'm saying, like I was saying, I wasn't thinking completely rationally at the time.
This clip has been misconstrued by the community at large for literal years now, because Scott is notoriously terrible at telling us anything outright. But I think that this is actually pretty simple. Scott says here that he wanted to make a more light-hearted entry into the series because he was getting tired of all of his stories being dark and depressing, especially after FNAF 4. And then he says that he regrets tying that desire to a canon game, and that he should have just made a troll game instead. So, he's saying that he should have made a troll game, and instead he made a canon game. Which means he literally said outright that the game is canon. He says that he regrets tying his desire to make a lighthearted game to a canon game, but he did. FNAF World is, without any form of doubt, a canon entry into the series. I truly wish that it wasn't. Trust me. FNAF World being canon adds a lot of confusion into the series for me. And if you don't understand the ramifications of that yet, you will by the end of this video. But for now, let's move on from the debate of whether or not this game is canon and actually start talking about what happens in the game for a bit.
Everything that happens out there has an effect here. Do you understand? This is a safe place. This is a sanctuary. But something has gone wrong, and now it can be seen here. Something went very wrong. That's why I'm here. But I won't let the same happen to you. I will put you back together.
The first time you open FNAF World, you're met with that dialogue, read to you by a sprite of 2 yellow eyes. We don't know who this character is, and we don't know if this is being said to us or someone else entirely. It sounds like it's being directed at the crying child, considering that the words "I will put you back together" are being echoed here. And then, from this point on, FNAF World is loud, to say the very least. And apart from that, on the surface, it's innocent. You run through the game, recruit animatronics, beat bosses, and fight Scott Cawthon's self-insert. Except not really, because Scott has stated that he himself isn't canon to the series. So this isn't actually Scott, it's Anim Dude. Whatever. But yeah, on the surface, FNAF World seems like it really doesn't have much going on. Unless you wait out all of Fredbear's dialogue and learn about the game's clock route. This is where all of the story of the game seems to take place, where the actual plot of FNAF World comes into play. By waiting until the end of Fredbear's dialogue, he starts to glitch out and suddenly has 2 yellow eyes, just like what we saw in the intro for the game. Glitchbear, as I'll be calling them, tells us that rather than do everything that the game is telling us to do, we should instead prioritize, quote, leaving breadcrumbs for him to help him find his way. Glitchbear has us doing this in the form of picking up clocks that are scattered throughout the world. And when we interact with one of these clocks, we're sent into a minigame that closely resembles the hints that you can find in FNAF 3's Follow Me. The same hints that lead you to Happiest Day at the end of that game. As you're collecting these clocks, you get more dialogue from Glitchbear, where they say a few interesting things. One of the things that they say is that there is no safe place, which is in direct contradiction to what the yellow-eyed speaker says at the start of the game. Furthermore, another thing that gets mentioned throughout the game, not directly by Glitchbear but by Fredbear, is the concept of the Flipside, and something bad happening on it. We're never actually given any information on what this Flipside is, though. All we know is that something bad must have happened there, and it's causing things to go wrong in FNAF World. Glitchbear is probably referencing this when they say that everything that happens out there has an effect in here. But that's just an educated guess from me, really. Back on point. Once you've collected all of the clocks, you can reach the special ending of this route, where you're once again met with the yellow-eyed speaker from earlier. And they have this to say.
We are still your friends. Do you believe that? The pieces are in place for you. All you have to do is find them. Rest.
Anyone who knows anything about this series can tell you what's going on here. The phrase, "we are still your friends," as well as the phrase, "I will put you back together," that the yellow-eyed speaker said at the start of the game, have only ever been said to the crying child in FNAF 4 by his probably haunted or maybe mind-reading plush bear. Not only does this directly connect us to the yellow-eyed speaker, but it also separates us from the crying child. Throughout the clock route, we're told that we're setting breadcrumbs for him, that we're doing all of this for him. But during the intro and final scene of the game, the yellow-eyed speaker is saying, "The pieces are in place for you, and I will put you back together." This recontextualizes the contradiction between the yellow-eyed speaker and Glitchbear when it comes to this place being a safe place and there not being a safe place. I don't think it means that Glitchbear and the yellow-eyed speaker are two different people. Instead, I think that they're just feeding us a different story than the crying child. I think that this person is trying to comfort the crying child and help him find his way, while being much more direct with us and telling us to do things that would help the crying child. So, all of this actually seems rather simple at first glance. We're setting up the crying child's happiest day, the one that we see at the end of FNAF 3. Easy, right? Well, it would be easy, if not for one little variable. The flip side. The reason that the events of this game take place is because of the, quote, bad thing that happened on the flip side. As such, your first guess as to what the bad thing is probably relates to the crying child, since the entire point of FNAF World seems to be about helping him find his happiest day. That makes sense on the surface, except it's impossible. Of the many characters you could find in this game, you can play as all of the FNAF 3 animatronics. None of these characters existed by the time of the crying child's death, least of all Springtrap. Because of this, I have to assume that whatever happened on the flip side happened at the absolute earliest during FNAF 3, which takes place in the mid to late 2010s, multiple decades after the death of the crying child. So whatever happened on the flip side can't be his death, or anything that's particularly related to him. This calls into question not only what the bad thing that happened could be, but also what the flip side is in the first place. After all, it feels like this has to do with the crying child somehow, since it sounds like the goal of this game is to fix the crying child. But how? Well, to figure that out, we have to figure out what the flip side is, which is a Herculean task, because this is one of those things that the community has literally never agreed on. Some people think that it's meant to be the world that the rest of the franchise takes place in. Some people think that it's the literal, real world that people like you and I live in. And some people just close their eyes and hope this goes away because it's too f***ing confusing. Hi, I was one of those before my research for this video began. But now I have an answer of my own. And to get this answer, we have to explore everything else that the game is giving us to help narrow down our search. So, to start, let's try identifying who this yellow-eyed speaker is that's talking to the crying child. Like I said earlier, since they're echoing the exact same things that Plush Bear is saying in FNAF 4, I'm led to believe that these two entities are one and the same. And if you watched any of my FNAF 4 video, you'll know that I think that the Plush Bear speaker in that game is none other than Cassidy, the character that has always been connected to the crying child. By the way, I'm still on the train of Cassidy being the vengeful spirit at the time of this video. Just gonna get that out there because it's relevant to everything else that I have to say. We'll have a more in-depth conversation on the topic when we get to the inevitable UCN video, but for now, just know that I'm gonna be operating onto the idea that Cassidy is our vengeful spirit. Moving on from that little side tangent, with the idea that the yellow-eyed speaker is Cassidy, we can now try to hone in on what the bad thing could possibly be. It's something that Cassidy specifically takes issue with, and it happens sometime either during or after FNAF 3, not any earlier. So, with our search narrowed down, we can actually come to an answer. Because when it comes to what Cassidy wants and doesn't want this late in the timeline, our minds can only really go to one place: Ultimate Custom Night. The game that, weirdly enough, has a lot in common with FNAF World. One of the silly things that these two games have in common is that, randomly, 3 different enemies that are only seen in FNAF World can appear on your desk in UCN, which nobody really talks about because it just seems like a silly little Easter egg. However, there is a much deeper and more obvious connection between these two games: Old Man Consequences. As I'm sure all of you know, in FNAF World, you can find Old Man Consequences at his lake by going 4 layers deep. When you find him, you can either speak to him, or you can drown in his lake. Doing either of these will award you with a trophy. I'm sure all of you know that, but most of you probably don't know that there's a third way to get this trophy. One that doesn't even require playing FNAF World. Instead, you can get it by playing Ultimate Custom Night. Both of these games are free, so if you don't believe me, I implore you to try this for yourself. All you have to do is open Ultimate Custom Night, set Old Man Consequences to an AI level of 1 while everyone else is at an AI level of 0, play his minigame, and you'll end up in the same area that you find him in FNAF World. And by entering this area, you get the trophy for doing this in FNAF World. And this makes absolutely 0 sense. How are you getting a trophy for FNAF World without even opening FNAF World, let alone interacting with it? Well, that's just the thing. What if we are interacting with FNAF World here? Think about it. These 2 instances of these 2 games are the only time we ever see OMC himself in this form, barring cut content from Into the Pit. Some people believe you can see another version of him in Princess Quest, sure, but that's not the same as this. These 2 in-game areas are practically identical to each other. That doesn't really tend to happen by accident, and neither does getting a trophy for a game by playing another game entirely. So, what if? What if this isn't an accident? What if it's not a mistake that doing something in Ultimate Custom Night impacts FNAF World? After all, doesn't the game start off by telling us this?
Everything that happens out there has an effect here. Do you understand?
Everything that happens in Ultimate Custom Night has an effect on FNAF World. These 2 games have an undeniable connection to each other, not only through this achievement, but also through this very lake that we can only find in these 2 games, and the fact that FNAF World enemies literally bleed through and appear in Ultimate Custom Night. And so, I'm left with only one conclusion. FNAF World and Ultimate Custom Night are flip sides of each other. This changes everything that we know about FNAF World. Not only does this give us an idea of what the flip side is, but it gives us an idea of what the bad thing that happened was, and an idea of when FNAF World takes place. If these two games are mirroring each other, if they're flip sides of each other, then they naturally take place at the same time as each other. This means that FNAF World takes place post FNAF 6, and as far as I can tell, right before the events of Help Wanted. The reason that I know this is because, in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC, you can hear Fredbear's UCN dialogue playing in the background during the minigame Danger Keep Out. These voice lines only appear in Ultimate Custom Night, so the fact that we can hear them in this game means that somehow, someone, or something at Fazbear Entertainment was able to access the inner workings of Ultimate Custom Night, and by proxy, what was happening to William. This was almost certainly the AI that was in the old technology that the original development crew scanned into the game. As told to us by Tape Girl, Fazbear Entertainment gave the development crew of the VR game a bunch of old circuit boards and such that apparently had usable code on it. An AI that took hold by itself and started to spread itself everywhere. This is presumably the Mimic 1 program that has been in use throughout at least all of the Steel Bull era of FNAF games. So, when this AI began to spread around and learn about everything that there was to learn about, it eventually came into contact with whatever was left of the FNAF 6 fire. When this happened, I believe that somehow, whatever was left of William Afton's soul was able to latch on to the AI, and because of this, the AI learned about everything that was present for Ultimate Custom Night. This is how Help Wanted was able to include things like Fredbear's UCN dialogue, as well as Nightmarion, who was specifically not canon to FNAF 4, and only otherwise existed in UCN, and wouldn't you know it, FNAF World. This is also more than likely the reasoning behind the extra characters that appeared in FNAF World, as stated by Fredbear toward the start of the game. But most importantly of all, this event was the creation of Glitch Trap. Glitch Trap's very existence, as well as its escape from Help Wanted, is an affront to literally everything that Cassidy has been doing as the Vengeful Spirit, because it means that somehow William Afton was able to escape from UCN in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, this is bad. And so, Cassidy has to put a stop to it, and in order for that to happen, UCN has to end. I don't think Cassidy can just step out of it whenever they please. I think it's a space that everyone is theoretically trapped in, that William just so happened to escape from entirely by chance, thanks to an AI that nobody could have accounted for. But since Cassidy isn't so lucky, they have to take matters into their own hands. And this is where Happiest Day comes in. This is the true purpose of Happiest Day. By freeing the crying child and the rest of the spirits from the prison that is Ultimate Custom Night, it will completely cease to exist, and allow Cassidy to return to the real world and continue their pursuit of William Afton. I believe that Cassidy does this in the form of the Blob, and that it presumably looks a lot like what we see during the burn trap sequence in Security Breach, where the Blob finds something that is reminiscent of Afton and eats it. Now, I know, this has been a pretty out there theory. It's one of those theories that makes you really wonder if Scott ever meant it when he said that the series was going to end, because, well, this video is based off of the idea that FNAF World is directly connected to two games that weren't even out by the time of its release, and this was around the time when Scott was saying that this was truly the end of the story. Did he ever mean that? Well, honestly, probably not. He churned these games out way too fast for me to think that he never planned ahead at least a little bit. Anyway, before I delve too deep into trying to psychoanalyze Scott Cawthon's plans for this series, let's talk a bit more about the story. So far, I've given you an explanation for when this game can take place, what the flip side is, and even the reasoning and ultimate result of Happiest Day. These are all pretty important pieces of the overall puzzle that is the FNAF lore. That is, if I'm right about this theory. But in order for me to be right, I also need to answer two pretty big questions about this game. Two questions that, under this interpretation, I don't have an answer for at the moment. One of these questions, funnily enough, has to do with Old Man Consequences. I mentioned that you can drown in his lake in FNAF World, but what I didn't mention is what happens when you do it. Because apart from getting the trophy, you also get this image right here, titled Happiest Day, which features 3 people standing in front of a TV. Or a person facing us with angel wings, which honestly I thought was an insane take at first, but now I can't unsee it. I have no idea what this image is about. Under the context of this theory, this image no longer makes any sense to me. For the longest time, I thought that it was an image of the 3 Afton children, Mike in the middle with Cece and Elizabeth on either side of him. That's a pretty common answer for this image to my understanding, but I think that feels kinda out of place in comparison to the rest of the game. We don't see any mention of Mike in this game whatsoever, and honestly, I have more than one reason to assume that Mike may have survived the FNAF 6 fire. So if he's still alive, then I don't think he's getting his happiest day anytime soon. I've also heard some people say that this image is of Scott Cawthon himself and 2 of his kids. And while that's sweet and all, I'm pretty sure that Scott would also include his wife if it was meant to be something sentimental. Not only that, but that would be super meta, which I don't think that this game is supposed to be at all. So ultimately, I don't think that this image is of Scott Cawthon either, so yeah, I have no idea what's happening here. The other thing that I can't seem to wrap my head around is Deskman. I'm gonna be straight up with you guys, I have no earthly idea who this could possibly be. According to him, he made the minigames that we play through in FNAF World's update, and he also created Baby, who proceeds to show up and kill him? This entire exchange is really weird, and it went absolutely nowhere, because FNAF World never got another update, and I'm positive that it was meant to at some point in time. This bit feels like an incomplete story, through and through. Anyway, so who could Deskman be? Well, it's definitely not William. He's busy turning himself into an AI and trying to escape into the real world by this point in time. I'd be baffled if it was Henry, but I suppose it's technically not impossible. You'd have to show me some evidence of him assisting with creating Baby in the games though, which, to my understanding, we're severely lacking. Sure, he did it in the Silver Eyes, but I don't want to use what happened in the books as evidence if I don't have anything else backing that up. There's also the idea of it being the rogue indie developer that Fazbear Entertainment hired in Help Wanted, but I don't know if Scott specifically planned that part of Help Wanted this far ahead of time. I think he had a lot of things planned for the future of the series by the time he made FNAF World, but I don't think he had every single detail mapped out in his head by any means. Speaking of Scott, he is the other possibility that some people in the community have brought up. However, I don't think that this one is true at all. Scott has said before that he himself is not canon to Five Nights at Freddy's, and if FNAF World is a canon game, then yeah, it can't be him. Then again, this is dialogue from the update of FNAF World, where you can fight Scott Cawthon as a floating head as he rambles on about FNAF 60, Breakfast at Chica's, a romantic comedy where Chica is a killer with a heart of gold. Oh my gods, was this the start of High School Chica from UCN? Also, the entire reason that Scott said that he isn't canon to FNAF is because of the real-life photograph of him used to represent the, quote, rogue indie dev in Help Wanted, which, oh lord, does that mean that the floating Scott head is also the rogue indie dev? Can I use that as evidence? God, I hate my job. Anyway, so now that we've gone through all of that, we have to ask, was FNAF World ever solved? Well, no. FNAF World was never solved. Not by anyone else in the community, and certainly not by me. I think that I have the start of something, I really do, but I'm not all the way there yet. But if any of you watching this have any ideas for the questions that I have yet to answer in this video, let me know. Because good lord, do I want a break from thinking about this game for myself. Thanks for watching. I have been dreading this video for the past forever, basically. FNAF World is a game that I am notoriously not a fan of. I think that everything from its gameplay, to its aesthetic, to its story, are incredibly uninteresting. This game has some kind of a cult following now, and I have never once understood why. And I love RPGs. It's my favorite video game genre of all time. But this one just isn't very good. Trust me, I wish that it was. But that's enough incessant rambling from me. If you enjoyed the video, or if it at least got you to rethink some things from FNAF World, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and if you're on mobile, hit the hype button for me. Every bit of support helps. And with that, I'm out of here. Stay tuned for the sister location video, happening sometime within the next couple of months, I hope. I haven't actually started research on that one yet, so we'll see how that goes. Take it easy.